Hello everyone, this is Professor Sexton with a video lecture on using quotations for literary papers and signal phrases. First of all, let me begin by stating that both of these documents can be found in course documents. So what you may want to do is you may want to review the documents first and then listen to the video lecture, or listen to the video lecture first and then review the course documents. So let me begin by sharing the using quotation for literary papers document with you. Okay, that document is now appearing. So first of all, let me just say a few things about quotations. Using quotations in a literary paper is probably one of the most effective ways of providing textual evidence to support your central ideal or thesis, the argument that you're making. Because what the quotations do is they use to illustrate your point. But you want to make sure that when you do decide to use quotations, that you're using them for a reason, that they are being used to emphasize your point, to prove your point. And so you don't want to just put a quotation in randomly. You want to make sure that that quotation has purpose. Whenever you do quote from a literary work, you want to also make sure that after you use a quotation, that you explain the significance of that quotation to your argument. So you don't want to just put the quotation in and not do anything with it. And even though I know that I've read the literary works that you're going to be writing your papers on, you still want to use quotations because when I am reading your papers, I am not going to have the original source in front of me. So I won't be looking back at the poems or the short stories or the plays. So there's something very important in the literary work that forms a basis of your argument. You want to provide that quotation in the paper so I can see it, or whoever your reader is can see it. So there are various ways to use quotations, and the way that you quote from a short story, novel, and an essay is different from the way that you quote from poetry. For this document, let me just go over both of them quickly. So there are two formats for using quotations. You can either incorporate the quotation into your own sentence, or you can use a complete sentence before the quotation. So the first thing that I'm going to explain is how you do it for short stories, novels, and essays. So if I incorporate the quotation into my own sentence, if you look at this example, on the second pillow the people find, that's my own sentence. A long strand of iron gray hair is the quotation from the text that I'm incorporating. So what I have beforehand is not a complete sentence, but I bring in the quotation into my sentence. Notice that when you read these together, it reads as one complete sentence. So that is one way to do it. And then you'll need a parenthetical citations. For short stories, what you'll do after the quotation, you open parentheses, put in the author's last name, page number, close parentheses, and period. Notice there is no punctuation mark between the author's last name and the page number. Another way is to use a complete sentence before the quotation. So if you look at this example, Gilman refers to her own history when she mentions Weir Mitchell in the story. This is a complete sentence. Then I put a colon and then I add the quotation. The citation here is slightly different. So notice that at the end of the quotation, instead of including the author's last name and the page number, I only have the page number. And the reason why is I have the author's last name in my sentence. So if you include the author's last name in your sentence, when it comes to the parenthetical citation, you only need the page number. Underneath both of these, I go into a further explanation of what I'm doing. So for this video lecture, I'm not going to go over all of that in detail. When you look at the document, you can read that yourself. If you're doing 4 lines or more, then you use something called block quotations. And so let me just show you how that looks. So if you need to quote 4 lines or more to illustrate your point, what you do is you have a complete sentence, add a colon, then you hit tab or return, and then you start the quotation on a new line. And notice that when you do this, there are no quotation marks around the actual quotation, but the citation remains the same. Let me caution you about using 4 lines or more. You only want to do that if you absolutely need all of that information to illustrate your point and that you make a reference to all of that. If you don't make a reference to all of it, then you don't need to give all 4 lines. There will be some instances when you do, but just make sure that you're using quotations economically and judiciously. Now, these first examples was for short stories. So keep in mind that short stories. The next one is for poetry. They're still the same 2 formats where you can incorporate the quotations into your sentence or introduce a sentence before the quotation. However, with poetry, the parenthetical citation is different. With poetry, instead of giving the page numbers, all you do is give the line numbers. So all the poems that we've read, if you notice that on the right-hand margin of those poems, every 5 lines there's a number. So you have 5, and then you have 10, and you have 15, and so forth and so on. And what that does is that lets you know what line, how they give the numbers, they give numbers to the lines. So when you quote in a line of poetry, you only give the line number in the citation. So notice here, so long as man can breathe or eyes can see, so long as this and this gives life to thee. This is line 13 and 14 of this poem. I use a forward slash to indicate, sorry, I use a forward slash to indicate where there is a line break. So this is line 13, this is line 14. But keep in mind the same way that you did with short stories, where you can either incorporate the quotation into your sentence or you can have a sentence beforehand. So same thing there. Just 2 extra things about using poetry. Sometimes when you're quoting a line of poetry, it might be necessary for you. I'm sorry, skipping in here. It might be necessary for you to add words to the quotations to make it work. And if you need to add words to the quotations or letters, open a bracket, put the additional letter or word in brackets. And what that symbolizes to your reader is that this is additional information that you've added for clarity. Likewise, there might be times where you will want to delete words or phrases from the quotation because all of it is not necessary for your argument. If you want to do that, what you'll do is you'll use ellipses to indicate to your reader where the information has been left out. So an ellipsis is just 3 periods or 3 dots. And what that signifies to your reader is that you've taken information out of the quotation. And so the most important thing here with using quotations is you want to make sure that you're using them to illustrate your argument, to illustrate your point, that any quotation that you do use, you make a reference to it, you provide an analysis for it, and you show how it fits into your argument. Keep in mind that there are 2 ways to use the quotation, that what you can do is you can incorporate it into your own sentence, or you can use an introductory sentence before the quotation. You also want to take away from this parenthetical citations. So for short stories and novels and essays, if you do not mention the author's last name in your own sentence, then the author's last name needs to be in the parenthetical citation. So Faulkner 38. If the author's last name is mentioned, then just the page number. This is for short stories and novels and for some plays. Then for poetry, keep in mind that all you're doing is you're doing the line numbers. So I do really encourage you to read this document for yourself from start to finish, because there's a lot of explanation and additional information there that will be beneficial that I didn't go over here. One other document that I want to share with you is signal phrases, and I'm not going to talk about this in a lot of detail. But the important thing about signal phrases is these are the words that you use when you're introducing a quote. And more often than not, we tend to use states or says, which is fine to use once or twice, but you want to not always use that because then it becomes monotonous and repetitious. And so what you want to do is you want to vary those signal phrases that you use. And so what this document does is it gives you a number of other signal phrases that you can use, such as acknowledges, omit, comments, confirms, denies, endorses, grants, juxtaposes, questions. So just for variation in the way that you introduce quotations, you want to change those taglines. So what you'll want to do is you want to refer back to this document. The last piece of advice that I'm going to offer to you as you're working on your papers in this course is to continue to go back to the using quotation document and the signal phrases document. So even though we've talked about it now at this point in the semester, you want to constantly make references back to this document because it will be beneficial for you as you continue to write papers in this class. Okay, I hope everyone is doing well and take care. Bye.